Hey everyone, Heero here, and today we're gonna look at Norma, a unique off-field stunner that is capable of dealing really good damage while enabling DPSs to proc more chain attacks. I'll be discussing her kit, builds, wenjins, and possible themes. Just as a quick disclaimer though, the footage and information that will be shown is from the creator experience server, so things can still change when her banner drops. Let's first discuss her unique resource called Preheated Chamber, which of course has a max percentage of 100% for a full bar, with you gaining 1.5% of the bar per second passively, but she also gets differing percentages through the start of combat, her EX special, and ult. But on that note, we can look at her charge basic attack hat trick since it's heavily related to her Preheated Chamber resource. First of all, upon using this skill, it deals damage and triggers a backwards quick assist, while summoning her top hat companion to wander the field. Just note, the quick assist triggered from this ability does have a 5-second cooldown. But it is also worth to mention that even without using her charged basic attack, the top hat companion will automatically get summoned upon switching out of her as long as her preheated chamber isn't full. Now normally Norma can only passively generate 1.5 preheated chamber per second if she's on field. However, when Top Hat Companion is summoned, not only does it stay on field even if Norma is switched out, it also passively generates and stores preheated chamber at the same speed on behalf of Norma, indicated by the different color portion of her bar, which of course allows her to build her resource even while off field. Now, Norma can only gain the Top Hat Companion's stored preheated chamber when she retrieves it, which can be done in 3 ways. The first is simply by walking near it with Norma to have her pick it up. The second is by holding basic with Norma to have the Top Hat Companion rush to her. And finally, if the stored preheated chamber would put Norma's bar at 80% or more, the Top Hat Companion would automatically rush and return to Norma when you switch onto her. But on that note, thanks to her core passive, once Norma has at least 80% of her preheated chamber bar, her next charged basic will consume 80% of her bar to trigger a quick assist regardless of its cooldown. And said quick assist will be replaced by the chain attack of the incoming character instead. Of course, this allows for significantly more chain attacks, which is insane for units that benefit greatly from them, either to deal more damage, generate more decibels, or for their kit's mechanics. But now, we can talk about her EX special, which does a lot of things. First of all, if the primary target is not stunned, the attack fires an armor-piercing warhead that deals significantly more daze. However, if the target is stunned, it fires an explosive warhead instead that deals significantly more damage. Now, after using the EX special, Norma gains 16% of her preheated chamber while entering the Enna barrage state for 32 seconds. While in this state, Norma summons 2 turrets that automatically attack enemies, and it is the main way she can build daze and stun while she's off field. Now, it's also worth noting that you can hold down the EX special button to have Norma continually consume energy to keep on firing for up to 2 seconds. And for each 1 point of energy consumed this way, it generates 0.4% more preheated chamber on top of the 16% she already gets, while also extending the duration of her Enna barrage state by 0.8 seconds per point of energy consumed, up to a maximum extra duration of 32 seconds for a total max duration of 64 seconds. Now on that note, we can move on to her EX special Explosive Experiment. Whenever an enemy is stunned or Norma consumes preheated chamber to trigger a chain attack, her turrets gets enhanced with missiles for a refreshable 8-second duration. During this time, the turrets not only attack more frequently, but they also gain the warhead effect of her EX special. But moving on to her ult, which is her fairly standard high damage and daze dealing ult, but the neat thing is, it also recharges 30% of her preheated chamber bar. While for her core passive, aside from her preheated chamber and bonus chain attack mechanics, it also has 2 other neat mechanics. First, when her initial out-of-battle crit rate exceeds 50%, every additional 1% increases her crit damage by 1.7%, up to a max buff of 85%. And it also increases the daze dealt by her EX specials, and ult by 0.8%, up to a max daze increase of 40%. Now to max out this buff, This does require Norma to have 100% crit rate out of battle. However, this crit focus build, alongside her EX specials, is what allows her to deal good damage despite being a stunner. But moving on, her core passive also makes it so that for every point of sheer force she has, her attack increases by 1.25 up to a max buff of 1200 attack. And finally, for her additional ability, which needs an attack or rupture agent to activate. Whenever Norma, her turrets, or our combat Bang Boo hits an enemy, they apply 1 stack of Tech Divide, with each stack increasing the stun damage multiplier of the target by 3%, stacking up to 10 times for a 30% stun multiplier increase. Enemies with Tech Divide also have their stun duration increased by 2 seconds. Now, aside from this, her additional ability also gives her an attack buff when her Enna Barrage state is active. It has a base buff of 44 attack, however the buff increases by 14 attack per each of Norma's levels, with her getting an 870 attack buff at level 60. And finally, her Enna Barrage state also gives a 20% damage buff to the party while it's active. But for Talent Prio, level up her core in skill first, then her ult, then her assist and basics, and finally, you can just ignore her dodge. But with her kit out of the way, let's talk about her Mindscapes. Her M1 increases the duration of her enhanced turret to 12 seconds, and whenever a missile from her EX special or enhanced turret hits an enemy, they are inflicted with a 15% all-attribute reshred. Overall, it's just a neat Mindscape that increases her damage by a considerable amount, while also buffing the party's overall damage. Her E2 increases the stun damage multiplier bonus for each stack of Tech Divide to 6% per stack, allowing for a 60% stun multiplier bonus at full stacks. Aside from this, it also gives her 25 energy after using her charged basic. Just note, this effect has a cooldown of 25 seconds. Her M4 gives the incoming agent 200 decibels every time she consumes preheated chamber to trigger a chain attack, which of course is pretty neat for more ults. And finally, for her M6, after an enemy is stunned, Norma will constantly bombard the enemy for 6 seconds, with repeated triggers resetting the duration. But during this bombardment, she launches a missile every 0.75 seconds that deals an attack scaling fire AoE that is considered as ult damage. But sadly, this bombardment does have a cooldown of 30 seconds, but from experience, you can usually get it in time for a stun. This Mindscape also increases the days of her armor-piercing warheads by 30% and the damage of her high-explosive warhead by 30%. And with her Mindscapes out of the way, let's talk about her possible vengeance. Norma's signature gives 24% crit rate with its main stat, while giving her 30 impact and a 15% fire res ignore just by equipping it. Aside from this, it also increases her ER when she's off-field, and when she uses her EX special, it gives a party-wide damage buff with a refreshable 30-second duration. That can stack up to 2 times for a really good 25% party-wide damage buff. Overall, it's a really great engine that boosts her personal damage by a ton, while also improving her support utility and making it easier to reach her 100% crit rate threshold. But it's worth noting that other crit rate stunner Wenjins are only really stat sticks for Norma, so not having her signature does cause her damage to drop off by a ton. Especially if you can't get enough crit rate from substats to compensate for it. But thankfully, when it comes to days building, other Wenjins can still easily compensate for not having her signature. But with that being said, for alternatives, you of course have any crit rate Wenjin to help her get to 100% crit rate. Now, these options are more oriented towards Norma's personal damage. However, just note, a stunner Wenjin is still significantly better than any of these for days building. And out of all of these, the best is Dial-In Signature, since Norma can still benefit from the energy from its passive. But speaking of which, Hellfire Gears is also a pretty decent budget option, primarily for days building. It provides tons of impact with its main stat and passive that you can have decent uptime of thanks to her EX specials and enhanced off-field attacks. It also provides the same off-field ER bonus as her signature. Now for 4-star options, you have 3 free-to-play choices. Simmering Pot is what I would consider to be an all-rounder option that improves both her days build-up and damage. While Fossilized Core is great for stunning due to its huge days and impact buff. but I only recommend using it for Deadly Assault due to the nature of its passive. And finally, there's Steam Oven that's also pretty good for overall days building, and it also provides ER, which of course Norma benefits from. But with possible wengeance out of the way, let's talk about drive discs. Now for the 4-piece set, King of the Summit is her best set, allowing her to stun faster while increasing the party's damage through a massive 30% crit damage buff. Overall, it synergizes directly with her want to build lots of crit rate, and just like most stunners, it's really the only set you should consider for her until we get a better set. While for the 2-piece set, the best is Woodpecker, since it helps Norma get lots of crit rate for her core passive and the Mountain set. Just note, if you're not yet at 100% crit rate, or at least not extremely close to it, this is her most recommended 2-piece set for her overall damage and days building. However, a 2-piece ER is also really good if you can reach 100% crit rate, or at least get pretty near it without a Woodpecker Electro, or if you simply want to regen energy faster for more chain attacks and days from EX specials. But with their possible drive discs out of the way, let's talk about stats. For main stats, you want crit rate for slot 4, fire pen or attack for slot 5, and finally energy regen or impact for slot 6. Energy regen is preferred if you want to use more energy for her EX special, so her turrets last longer, and to get Norma's chain attack procs faster. It's also great when running Norma with units like Pyrois or Cissia that prefer more chain attacks to help with their resource generation or mechanics. Plus, it is great for content where impact doesn't really result in more stuns, which could be the case for shorter stages like Shield Defense. On the other hand, impact is really great for content that can easily allow it to result in an extra stun like longer stages like Deadly Assault. And for the slot 5 main stat, the damage difference between the 3 isn't too big, so just use the one with the best substats. Now for stat goals, getting to 100% crit rate out of battle is pretty much her only goal, and you should prioritize getting as close to it as you can. With some quick math, she gets about 51.4% crit rate without her signature and 75.4% with her signature. Meaning, you'll need 21 crit rate rolls to reach 100% without her signature and only 11 rolls with her signature or a 24% crit rate when Jin. So if you want to invest in more of her other offensive stats, her signature does become needed. Now as for attack and crit damage, just get however much you can with the drive discs you already have. Crit rate is a much higher priority, and she does already get lots of crit damage from her passive, but if you really want to get more, around 80 to 100% crit damage is pretty good. With her stats out of the way, let's talk about possible teammates. Let's first talk about Rupture teams, starting with Billy, which happens to be one of the best DPSs you can run alongside Norma, and despite Diolin's bigger buffs, Norma is still a pretty decent upgrade over her due to a few reasons. First, Billy greatly benefits from the more chain attacks, not only for more damage, but also for more charge basics and ultimates. Second, Billy benefits more from the more chain attacks that Norma gives compared to the more ults that Dialin provides. This is mainly due to Billy's ult having an extremely long animation, which isn't ideal during stun windows, especially when doing double ult rotations with Dialin. However, in comparison, his chain attack has a pretty quick animation while also dealing a ton of damage. So with Norma during a stun, you're able to perform a triple chain attack on top of still having time to perform Billy charge attacks, an ult, and some EX specials, which more than makes up for missing the ultimates Dialin can give Billy, especially when considering Norma's high personal damage and the bonus chain attacks, decibels, and charge attacks she gives Billy outside of stuns. Which brings us to the final reason, which is that Norma allows for significantly more combos and rotations that not only enables more Billy damage, but also makes the team more fun and less repetitive to play. Now, the only major con for the pairing is Billy's best Deadly Assault boss is the Thrall, which happens to be the worst matchup for Norma. This is because this boss in particular prefers burst days application due to how much he likes to run away. And sadly, Norma was designed to build days over a period of time instead of in huge bursts, with her ult being the only source of huge burst days buildup. So despite Norma allowing for significantly more Billy damage in a majority of content compared to Dialin, Dylan has an easier time stunning the boss and can perform on par or a bit better than Norma if you can get 4 stuns consistently within the fight. But if you can't get 4 good stuns against the Thrall with Dylan, Norma will have an easier time outperforming her due to her personal damage and the utility she provides Billy. However, for other bosses and content, Norma would definitely be better than Dylan for Billy, not just in terms of damage, but also fun and gameplay. So hopefully we get more physical weak bosses. As for other Rupture agents, she also works with Manato and Banwa. She of course gives them more field time to dish out combos and deal damage. But the neat thing is, since you typically run them in fire content, Norma herself also ends up dealing a lot of damage. Now sadly, I can't really say too much about Banwa since I'm terrible at playing him, and I don't want to give a false impression. But with Manato, she's definitely a great upgrade over Yufufu and even Dylan, with her high personal damage compensating for Manato's lower damage in today's endgame. While her bonus chain attack procs not only allow for more ults, but they also allow Manato to build more Remnant Flame for healing, meaning more HP for him to consume, which of course increases the uptime of his enhanced state. As for Yidhari, well, there's not really too much to say. Norma provides Yidhari more field time to deal damage while dealing good damage and days build up herself. But sadly, due to Yidhari gaining less decibels from attacks, she does benefit less from more chain attacks compared to other units. However, due to her ability to consume decibels and store her ultimate, the chain attacks can still help get her next ult faster, which of course is pretty neat. But again, since Yidhari benefits less from a chain attack's decibel gains, not only does Dylan's extra ult become more valuable for her, Dylan is still the best stunner for Yidhari, especially since one of her bosses is the Thrall, and again, that is one of Norma's worst bosses. However, if you don't have Dylan, Norma is still a decent alternative. However, I wouldn't recommend rolling for her specifically for Yidhari since Lycon is extremely good for ice agents while being considerably cheaper. And finally for Yixuan, well, since she is an alt DPS, he still definitely prefers Dylan over Norma. However, if you don't have her, Norma is definitely a great alternative while being a significant upgrade to Yufufu. This is simply due to the fact that she still enables more Yixuan ults and damage through the more chain attacks on top of dealing pretty good damage herself. You can basically just think of her as a better Yufufu. But the biggest con of using Norma over Dylan is you lose out on a triple ult stun rotation with Yixuan, which of course means less damage. But thanks to Norma giving more chain attacks and her high personal damage, she still enables a Yixuan team to perform decently well. So I would only use Norma if you don't have Dylan or she's preoccupied on another team. But I wouldn't roll for her if you're specifically planning to improve your Yixuan's performance. In this case, going for and saving for Dylan is still the better idea. Now for attacker teams, let's start with one of her best partners, which of course is Pyrois, who was designed to prefer Norma over Dylan. This is mainly due to the fact that chain attacks give Pyrois an extra 300 decibels on top of the base amount of decibels it already generates. This is on top of Pyrois only needing 2000 decibels to ult. And these two things actually enables Norma to give more ults to Pyrois compared to Dylan, which makes it easier to execute double ultimate stun rotations with Pyrois. And this is of course considering the amount of field time Norma gives them to deal damage and build resources. But aside from this, thanks to Pyrois holding up to 4k decibels, you won't really have to worry too much about wasting and overflowing on decibels when spamming Pyrois' chain attack and other abilities, which of course is a nice quality of life upgrade. But overall, due to her huge personal damage and the amount of damage she enables Pyrois to deal, on top of making him a bit easier to play, she is a huge upgrade to Dylan for this team. Plus, she is one of the comfier agents to play in the team, especially due to her being an off-field stunner. However, the neat thing is, since Pyrois is free, you can actually make one of the best Norma budget teams with Pyrois and Nicole, which can be considered to be a very good meta team for current endgame despite being fairly low cost. So if you really like Pyrois and want to run him in a traditional hypercarry setup, I highly suggest rolling for Norma. And I can only see this pairing getting better once we get Pyrois' other Mindscapes later down the line. Now, aside from Pyrois, another really great team to run Norma in is a main DPS Cissia team, with her now being the best stunner to run for that comp. Now, if you didn't know, a huge majority of Cissia's damage actually comes from her corrode bones instead of EX specials and ult. So for a main DPS Cissia, it is very important to generate Venom as fast as possible, and Norma helps exactly with that by allowing Cissia to proc more chain attacks. This significantly outweighs the bonus ults from Dialin simply due to the more corrode bone procs alone. Of course, this is on top of Norma also dealing good damage that gets boosted by Cissia's crit damage buff. And the neat thing is, since Cissia also deals a lot of days build-up herself, you're actually able to stun the enemy extremely often, which is great for overall team damage. And of course, this team gets even more insane, especially if you have Cissia's M2, which allows each of her chain attacks to now give 6 total venom for even more corrode bones. Now sadly, a lot of electric weak content and bosses are usually paired with fire resistances, which thankfully isn't as detrimental due to the amount of stuns Norma and Cissia can proc, but it does still cost Norma to deal less damage. But since we're on the topic, you can technically use Norma in other electric teams like Seed and S-Anby teams, but she's definitely far from the best unit for these teams, and there are several issues. The first of which is the elemental matchups I just mentioned while talking about Cissia. Second, Anby still prefers her full O-ball team, or more specifically, she prefers Trigger over Norma simply due to the fact that Norma is not an aftershock unit. So with the type matchup and S-Anby's buffs, it's highly likely Trigger just outdamages Norma. And finally, Seed and Anby's chain attacks have issues you have to consider. Seed has an extremely long chain attack that you can't quick swap out of, while S-Anby just has low multipliers for her chain attack. And it's really not worth it to proc either of their chain attacks with Norma during a stun, since they can easily waste time, especially if you plan to use their ults. Which of course leads to less damage due to the less Seed punches and less procs of S-Anby's EX specials and Silver Star aftershocks. Now, you can get around Seed's issue by giving Norma's chain attack procs to your second attack unit instead, while for S-Anby, you can just proc her chain attacks outside of a stun, or better yet, just give it to Orphe. But of course, Norma is far from the best unit for both of these teams, so I only suggest using her if you really have no one else to use for the team, which is highly unlikely for Seed teams since that team has better third slot options like Nicole, Astra, Suna, and more. But on that note, another great DPS to run with Norma is Hugo. With her being a massive upgrade to Dialin for the team, well, at least for pre-M2 Hugo. Norma's great damage allows her to easily compensate for the damage loss during Hugo's downtime. But this gets even crazier when you consider that Lighter, if you have him, also buffs all of Norma's damage. And of course, the decibels from Norma's chain attacks allows you to use Hugo's ult more often to trigger Totalize, which aside from resulting in more damage, also enables you to use his EX special to help stun the enemy. Overall, with just how much this team has going for it, a combo of Lighter and Norma is now one of Hugo's best M0 teams. However, sadly with an M2 Hugo, Dialin does become a bit more preferred, simply due to the fact that the Totalize from his ult at M2 doesn't end the stun, which allows you to perform double ult Totalizes. But of course, that's a much more expensive investment compared to just rolling for Norma. Norma can also work really well with Zhu Yuan. Of course, this is ignoring the fact that Pyrois is a better Ether attack agent, so I'm mentioning this pairing just for you fellow Zhu Yuan fans. First of all, just like with Hugo, Norma helps compensate for any damage loss from any downtime caused by Zhu Yuan being a burst DPS unit. This is of course due to Norma's great personal damage and her giving Zhu Yuan more chain attack procs. Speaking of which, the more chain attacks from Norma not only results in more damage and ults, but it also has other benefits for Zhu Yuan. It allows for more uptime of Zhu Yuan's additional ability, while also giving her significantly more shot shells throughout the whole battle. Which, depending on when you trigger the bonus chain, is really useful for keeping damage going outside of stuns or for longer high damage combos during stuns. But the thing is, if we have Zhu Yuan's M1, the pairing does become quite better, since it gives Zhu Yuan more shot shells per chain attack for even more charge attacks, which of course is pretty insane. Now hopefully, we get Zhu Yuan buff soon though. And just note, make sure to use the new Skies Ablaze set on Zhu Yuan, since it is now her best set for non-Dialan beams. Now finally, Norma also greatly benefits fire attacker teams, namely Evelyn or Soldier 11 comps. Which is a given since Evelyn is a chain attack DPS, so it's only natural that she benefits from more chain attacks, with her allowing Eve to perform 5 or more chain attacks during a stun extremely easily and consistently, especially when paired with Astra's ult for even more chain attacks. While Soldier 11 on the other hand, greatly benefits from having another optimal unit that can activate her additional ability other than Lighter. But it is worth noting that some longer S11 combos do not fit within a stun despite Norma's 2-second stun extension. But aside from this, Norma gives these two ample field time to deal damage and build resources. And the neat thing is, since she is a fire unit, every favorable content for these two is also favorable towards Norma. But hopefully we get more fire weak bosses and buffs for Evelyn soon. It's also worth noting that Sigrid is also an attacker agent, so there is a chance that she is a great partner for Norma. But of course, since her kit hasn't been officially revealed yet, I can't talk too much about her. But that's about it. Personally, I'm gonna have to skip Norma due to the fact that I want both Remiel and Sigrid. Mainly because I want to horse around with Sigrid. Get it? Because she's a horse girl and she likes puns? But anyway, make sure to tell me what you think about her in the comments below, and don't forget to hit me with a like and a sub.